What Ferrari has just uncovered is not a minor footnote in a turbulent Formula One season. No, what they've just found is a revelation so seismic, so disruptive, that it doesn't just explain why Lewis Hamilton has been struggling, it exposes a deep-rooted flaw at the very heart of Ferrari's entire Formula One program. And make no mistake, this isn't an oops the setup was wrong kind of problem. This isn't about blaming strategy calls or botched pit stops. This is about Ferrari's systems, Ferrari's culture, Ferrari's engineering philosophy, all colliding head-on with the driving DNA of the most decorated driver in Formula One history. And the result, a nightmare for Hamilton, a crisis for Ferrari, and a bombshell for the entire F1 world. When Hamilton signed with Ferrari, the sport was stunned. It was the move no one saw coming, and yet in hindsight it felt inevitable. A 7-time world champion, the record breaker of his era, moving to the most storied team in Formula One history, the headlines wrote themselves. Ferrari's long drought finally over, the champion reborn in red, the revival of an empire. But here we are, 14 races into the season, and what do we have? 0 podiums, not a single champagne celebration, not one glimpse of the dream so many believed was guaranteed. And yet if you think this is simply about Hamilton failing to adapt, you're wrong, dead wrong. Because behind closed doors in the simulator rooms of Maranello, Ferrari has just discovered why Hamilton has looked like a shadow of himself. And the answer is shocking. Let's talk about the simulator. To outsiders, the simulator is just a fancy video game, a glorified PlayStation for Formula One drivers. But insiders know better. In modern F1, the simulator is the racetrack before the racetrack. It's the crystal ball that predicts tire wear, track evolution, fuel loads, brake temperatures, crosswinds, every single variable that defines a Grand Prix weekend. The simulator is where drivers sculpt the setups that can make the difference between pole position and Q2 elimination. For Hamilton, it was supposed to be the bridge between his Mercedes instincts and his new Ferrari reality. But instead of being a bridge, it has become a wall. Here's the bombshell. Ferrari's simulator wasn't built for Hamilton. It wasn't even capable of translating the kind of feedback he needed. Why? Because for years the system had evolved around Charles Leclerc's style, his preferences, his driving DNA. Add in layers of legacy software that had been patched, tweaked and duct-taped together over the years, and you get a simulator that simply could not replicate Hamilton's demands. This isn't a rookie driver asking for too much. This is Lewis Hamilton, the man who helped build Mercedes' dynasty through meticulous feedback, who spent over a decade fine-tuning the feel of cars that dominated Formula One. His requests weren't luxuries, they were essentials. He wanted precise modeling of front-end pitch sensitivity. He asked for weight transfer tolerances. He demanded brake phase simulations under variable weather loads. And the Ferrari simulator, it couldn't deliver. The options were too narrow, too rigid, too primitive for a driver who builds his greatness on nuance. Imagine asking Picasso to paint with only 3 colors. That's what Hamilton was facing every single time he sat down in Ferrari's so-called state-of-the-art simulator. And the consequences were devastating. Simulations that looked promising on screen fell apart in reality. Setups that promised balance crumbled on track. Braking markers shifted unpredictably. Corner rotation became inconsistent. Balance was all over the place. And with each misfire, Hamilton's confidence eroded. But here's the cruel part. This erosion didn't happen in public. No, it happened in silence, behind closed doors where frustration quietly metastasized into doubt. But the simulator issue was just the beginning. Because what Ferrari uncovered next was even more shocking. The real bombshell was hiding in the braking system. At first glance it seemed like a minor detail, just a slightly different modulation curve, but under the microscope it became clear. Ferrari's 2025 spec SF25 with its revised Brembo braking layout had fundamentally changed the way the car responded under deceleration. On paper it was supposed to optimize cooling and rear stability. In reality it destroyed Hamilton's greatest weapon, his braking feel. For Hamilton, braking isn't just about slowing the car down. It's about rotating it, manipulating the balance, controlling the car's weight transfer with surgical precision. At Mercedes, he'd mastered a progressive, layered brake response that allowed him to trail brake into corners with unmatched artistry. At Ferrari, the bite point was sharper. The feedback was digital, on or off, rather than progressive. It was as if his most trusted tool had been ripped from his hands. And here's why that matters. When braking feel is wrong by even a few percentage points, the whole equation collapses. Tires overheat, lap times crumble, strategy implodes, and Hamilton, the man who has built his career on precision, was suddenly forced to relearn the most fundamental part of his driving arsenal: Every session became an exercise in rediscovery, every lap a battle against uncertainty, and the worst part, ambient conditions could shift it all again, undoing whatever progress he had clawed back. The symptoms were subtle but devastating. Slightly longer stopping distances, rear instability that appeared out of nowhere, an unpredictable balance at corner entry, tiny whispers that the casual fan wouldn't even notice. But over a race weekend, those whispers screamed. They were the difference between fighting for a podium and being knocked out in Q2 by a midfield team. Even Ferrari's own engineers began to admit it privately. Hamilton wasn't imagining this. He wasn't overreacting. He was being betrayed by tools that simply weren't built for him. And that's why Fred Vassar's recent comments matter so much. On the surface, his words sounded like gentle criticism, a manager urging his driver to adapt. But read between the lines and you realize something far more important. Vassar wasn't just speaking to the media, he was sending a coded message. The problem is real, the frustration is valid, and Ferrari knows it. But here's where the story explodes beyond technology and hardware. Because what we're really seeing here is a cultural clash. At Mercedes, problems like this wouldn't last months. They'd be solved in weeks, maybe even days. The Brackley operation runs like an engineering think tank, methodical, data-driven, obsessively precise. At Ferrari, passion rules as much as logic. Emotions bleed into decisions, and under pressure, that volatility spills over. Every radio message becomes a headline, every post-race interview becomes a political minefield, and suddenly Hamilton isn't just fighting a car, he's fighting a system. And make no mistake, this isn't just about Ferrari's 2025 car. This is about Hamilton's legacy, because if this experiment fails, it won't be written off as a technical hiccup. It'll be a scar on Ferrari's pride, a punchline in the paddock, a headline that reads, "Hamilton's dream in red turns into a nightmare." That's why Vassar's words matter so much. He isn't just defending Hamilton, he's defending the entire Ferrari-Hamilton project, the multi-million euro multi-year gamble that was supposed to reshape Formula One history. But finally, Ferrari's shocking discoveries have given Hamilton something he hasn't had all season. Clarity. The simulator broken, at least for him. The brake feel misaligned, fundamentally mismatched. For months the problem looked invisible. Now at last it has a name, a diagnosis. And for Hamilton, a driver who builds his greatness on feel, on process, on data, that clarity is everything. Of course, clarity doesn't equal solutions. Fixing the simulator won't be easy. It's not about flipping a switch. It'll mean rewriting core systems, retraining models, redesigning components that have been in place for years. Fixing the brakes could mean developing a new master cylinder, recalibrating pedal mapping, adjusting thermal behavior, all under the suffocating weight of the cost cap, and all while Ferrari still has to develop its 2026 car. The scale of the challenge is immense. But Hamilton's task is even harder, because he still has to race. He still has to show up every weekend, trust a process that has failed him, and somehow believe that redemption is possible. And let's not forget who we're talking about. This is a man with 105 wins, 7 world titles, a record book rewritten in his name. To tell him that progress will now be measured in invisible margins, in tenths and hundredths, is almost insulting, but that's the reality, that's the fight. And yet, here's the twist. What Ferrari's discovery has really given Hamilton is a chance to rewrite the story. If he can take this diagnosis and turn it into performance, the narrative flips overnight. Suddenly it's not about failure, it's about resurrection, not about a legend in decline but a legend reborn in red. The question is, will Ferrari give him the tools? Will they move fast enough? Can Hamilton silence the chaos, shut out the noise, and prove that this gamble wasn't a mistake, but the most dramatic redemption arc in Formula One history? The season isn't over, the story isn't finished, and if you thought the drama was dying down, think again. So now it's over to you. Has Ferrari already failed Hamilton, or is this just the painful beginning of a story that could end in glory? Let us know in the comments below, and hit that like button if you believe Hamilton can still turn this around. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next twist in this extraordinary saga.